Hello, everyone. My name's David Rose, and I'm here to relate to you my heavenly experience. This happened in '07, 13 years ago. I've been pondering for 13 years what to do with this experience. I've written a little booklet. I've told several friends about my experience, but at 71 years old, I just kind of decided recently that I really want to document this experience and share it with more people. So it's a little bit scary for me. I'm not sure how people might receive this, but it's okay because it's my experience and it is what it is. But um, this little talk is going to be informal. It's going to be unedited. So I'll chop off the front, I'll chop off the back, and bam, you get what you get, and it's real. So I need to set you up because the several times I've related this experience to people, I become very emotional, and I can't help it. It's just so powerful to me, reliving and talking about and sharing this experience with people. It just all comes back. I think about it every day, but somehow when I speak those words and relate it to people, it just fills me with emotion, and sometimes I cry. There might be gaps of silence while I recover, but I'm not going to edit those parts out. That's just part of it. It's part of my experience, and I want you to feel and experience that emotion and power and love along with me. So um, here we go. I was born into a Christian family, had good Christian values, attended Christian schools since the first grade, Christian colleges. Um, Everything I did was Christian, and worked with Christian organizations and tried to live a good Christian life my entire life. And in my work, which was surgery, um, I had the opportunity to firsthand witness and talk with some people who died and came back to life. And perhaps they died on the table and we revived them, saved them. But they all have a similar experience. I added it up over my lifetime, and they all see light, lots of light. They move toward the light, all kinds of different descriptions of light. And then there's music. And so white robes, I mean, there's a consistency there that I've learned and accepted over my lifetime. And when I was growing up, I had always read and heard in sermons and reading myself that the dead know not anything. And so I thought, well, yeah, okay, that's true. But after hearing a lifetime of stories like this in the medical industry and in surgery, I began to really wonder. And so when I experienced my experience, um, it almost seemed, I don't know, like one of the stories I had already heard, or I was familiar with the basics of what I experienced, and it was consistent with what I heard. But anyway, so here we are in '07. It's now 2020, and I'm divorced. I'm living alone. I'm self-employed, and I did a pretty good job of paying tithe to God over the years, especially recently. And one day I was just impressed that I should start tithing my time. So I set the alarm every day for 2.5 hours. And I read the Bible. I read other religious books. I studied nature. I prayed a lot. And I started listening for God. I mean, you can pray all day long, but if you get up and walk away and go do something else, God may be trying to connect with you and talk with you and respond to your prayer. So after I prayed, I would meditate and be silent and just listen and try to leave my mind open for God to enter information and words into my mind. And so I did this for months and months, and I felt like it was working for me. I learned how to seemingly be in a constant state of prayer with God throughout my day, no matter what I was doing. And it felt good. So one day in my meditation, I finished praying and I started to meditate. And I looked at the clock and I noticed what time it was. And I was really restless. You know, oh, this is not working. I can't release my mind. What's that sound outside? My knee hurts, you know. My legs are going to sleep. You know, I'm really uncomfortable. My back hurts. This is not working. So I felt like I was there for maybe 3 minutes. And so I got up and looked at the clock again. And an hour had passed. And I thought, no way. No way was that an hour. And so I didn't think much about it. I just considered it to be an anomaly or something. And then it happened again. And it happened again. And I was losing blocks of time. And I can't account for them. I don't know what was happening. But I talked to a friend of mine. We study the Bible together some. And I told her about that. And she said, David, you could be going to some very high places that you don't understand. And you don't remember it because you can't relate. You can't comprehend where you go and what you hear and what you do. Your mind is just not capable of receiving and remembering that. So if I'm losing blocks of time, I quit studying outside in nature. Sometimes I was actually close to cliffs and rivers. So I thought, well, that's not a good idea if I don't know what happened to me in the last hour. So I moved all of my tithing time inside. And so I felt a lot safer there. And then this one day, it was a normal day at work. I don't take any strong medication. I was on something for high cholesterol and blood pressure, and that's the only medication I take. And I don't drink, I don't smoke, no kind of drugs, no pain medication, straight up guy. And it was a normal day. No drama happened, nothing special happened that day. And I went to bed on time, probably 10 o'clock, and went promptly to sleep. I didn't have any trouble going to sleep. And then I started into my heavenly experience. And I don't remember my ascension into heaven like I remember my descension from heaven. Excuse me. And I'll tell you about my descension, and you'll understand the difference. So I remember just being in heaven in the middle of a conversation, talking to a being on what appeared to be a sidewalk. But it wasn't really a sidewalk like we know it on earth. It was a slab of light. And it was like you could almost see through it. And everything up there was made of light. Everything. And I seemed to have a guide or a host who was with me. And we were communicating, but we weren't speaking like I'm speaking now, like we normally communicate here on earth. We were communicating telepathically. I couldn't see a face. I couldn't see a figure of a body outline. There was a white fabric drape, seemingly, over this being, this individual. But it wasn't really fabric as we know it on the earth. It was light. I mean, this person was light and very bright, very crisp, and very clean, and just very sacred and holy and loving. And I could tell that I had come from a certain direction because we were walking in the other direction, not really walking. We were kind of floating. I didn't see any legs. I didn't see any feet. It was just moving with no effort, no activity, as if we were just hovering over light. And back from where we came, I could see this massive source of light off in the distance. And I couldn't see the exact source of light, but I could tell that I was very close to the source of light. And the light coming off from the source, whatever it was just unbelievably bright and thick. And the light was so bright and so brilliant and so powerful that you could hear the light. That was like a million lightning bolts, like we know on the earth, just constantly going off, constantly. And they were white, and there were hints of purple and hints of maroon and hints of gold in this light that would just crackle and go from a source up into the sky. In fact, there was no sky, not like we know it on earth. No blue over our head, no clouds, no atmosphere. It was just light. And this light that came from this source back in the distance went up over our heads and just spread out all overhead. It was just a light of love and caring and well-being. And there were the equivalents of shrubs and trees around that I could see. It looked like beautiful landscaping, but it wasn't what we know as trees and what we know as landscaping. Guess what? You're going to hear this a lot. It was made up of light. And it was absolutely beautiful. And so I continued on with my guide, and we were talking telepathically, and my guide was pointing out things and educating me on what I was seeing and what I was experiencing. And then suddenly, right in front of us, we approached this absolutely powerful, heavenly, holy being. And I don't even know how to describe this being. This being was huge. This being was tall. This being was a warrior, a heavenly equivalent of a warrior. Not like a warrior we know of here on the earth. This was a holy being. It was dressed in the heavenly equivalent of a warrior, and I can't even describe it. But the love that I felt up there in heaven was amazing. The love coming off of this massive being was just overwhelming. And the love that I felt coming from that light off in the distance was just overwhelming. Love, caring, well-being. I felt warm. I felt secure. I felt confident. Every good word that I can think of is the way I felt. And man, it felt so good. But I wanted so much to go up and meet this being, and I felt so comfortable with that being, and I can't describe it, but I was not given the opportunity. However, I did see that being and was just absolutely teetotally impressed with what I saw. Unbelievable. And I was guided away from that area and guided into what appeared to be the heavenly equivalent of a structure, a building, but it wasn't. It was some kind of an enclosure, but you could see through it. It was made of what? Light. And massive walls of light coming up from not the ground, but the equivalent of ground, which was light. And so I entered this structure, and there were many, many other beings in there. And I could see through the structure. I could see that massive light source that covered overhead. I could see that giant being out on the sidewalk where I just came. And so I was in this structure, but at the same time I wasn't. And there was no top to it, like a ceiling, like we build on the earth. It just went straight up. And so there seemed to be the earthly equivalent of a head table. And there was like a long line of beings here. And then I thought facing them, they're facing each other, this long line of people, and then a large mass, like an audience almost, of beings facing this line of people. It's like they're on a stage and here's the audience, sort of. And so my guide brought me over to this certain area on the side, and there was kind of a slab of light there. It looked like the heavenly equivalent of a table. And there was something on the table. And we were communicating telepathically, and I was being told that these items on this slab of light was my food. And I was being instructed on how to consume it. It didn't look like food to me. It was a mass of light. And so my guide demonstrated how to pick it up and how to consume it. And so I was told to do that, and I did as I was told. So I did what my guide did, and I consumed it. And it wasn't consuming like we eat, like there's a mouth here and there are fingers that pick up food and you put it in your mouth and chew it and swallow it. It was different. And I can't really express to you how it was different. I don't know. But I tell you, the taste of that food was absolutely amazing. There are no words on this earth to describe what that food tasted like. Think of your favorite foods. No matter what it is, think of how good it tastes to you. Well, those foods are nowhere close to the heavenly equivalent of what food tastes like in heaven. I mean, my goodness, it just blew my mind. And I asked my guide if I could have more, and I was given permission to eat more different kinds of food. And oh my goodness, it was just unbelievable. And I was told by my guide that I was now being healed by the food that I was consuming. My food was healing my body. And I began to feel warm. I could feel a change in my body. I could tell that something was happening to my body. I didn't know what. And I remember thinking, well, wait a minute, what's wrong with me? What am I being healed of? I mean, I had some high cholesterol. It wasn't too bad. You know, I take high blood pressure medicine. I control it with medication. Why am I being healed? And of what? So I was thinking that. I didn't ask my guide that question. So I thought, well, if heaven wants to heal me, that's good enough for me. I mean, I'm an earthling, and I certainly need healing because I'm a sinner. So, but man, what an experience. The taste of the food, the healing of the food, the feeling of me. It not only did it taste good, but I felt like I was consuming a feeling. I felt like I was consuming love. I felt like I was consuming salvation. I felt like I was consuming more than just something that you hold in your hand. It was eternal. It was real. It was a word I've never heard of. And I have yet to describe it. After all these years, after 13 years, I cannot express to anybody what I felt. I mean, it was just overwhelming. And then the most amazing thing happened. Sorry, I can't help it. the most amazing thing. In this line of beings that I told you about, a being in the middle of that line rose up. He didn't stand, he just rose up. And that being started singing. I'm a musician. I've sung all my life. I've performed all my life. I write music. I write songs. I'm a classical guitarist. I'm deeply embedded in music. Have been all my life. And I'm telling you, I have never heard a sound that pure ever in my life. It was a male voice, the earthly equivalent of a baritone, but it was different. I mean, the clarity of that voice was just amazing. And the volume, the volume I could feel in my body. I could feel those sound waves just reverberate my body. I've been to Cape Canaveral to watch rocket launches, and I get as close as I can so I can feel the vibration coming off that jet engine, so it would just shake my whole body. Well, that's the way I felt when I heard this man sing. And I can't even describe how it sounded. I mean, all of heaven had to hear this man singing. Maybe the whole universe, maybe all, I don't know. But again, there are no earthly words to express what I heard. And I could tell he was singing words, and there was a melody, but I couldn't understand the words. And then he got to this certain point in his song, and to my surprise, wow, he's singing English now, and I could understand the words. And what he sang was, "I gave my all for you." And he sang that much, I understood it, but then he went back into this other language that I couldn't understand. And he seemed to be singing verses, just like we do on earth, because he cycled back into that phrase again that I heard, "I gave my all for you." And at that point, that was the most amazing thing that I'd ever heard in my entire life until this next moment. Unbelievable. At this point, everybody, the whole congregation, audience, I don't know what to call them, but all these beings rose up and they sang with this one being up front as a choir. The volume was shattering. The harmony was close. The harmony was something I'd never heard before. The clarity of voices. There was no director, but they were absolutely teetotally together. And it was just absolutely amazing. I've heard choirs all over the world. I've sung in choirs. I listened to choirs in recordings. I've never heard anything like this. Um, I've told you I'm a musician. I spotted something, and I realized that the scale, the musical scale in heaven, is longer than the scale on the earth, which creates more opportunities for harmonies. And it was blowing my mind. I just stood there in amazement at what I was hearing. And even the choir, when they sang together, would cycle around and they would all sing, "I gave my all for you." And I don't know, I'm just so overwhelmed right now. I was overwhelmed then. It just stopped me in my tracks. And then, as quickly as it started, the song was over and everybody went back down to their original positions. And I remember communicating with some of the beings in this long row of people, and we were having a good conversation. I don't know what we were talking about. I don't think I understood then what we were talking about. It was way over my head. But I remember being fulfilled. I remember being loved. I remember being supported and mostly loved and accepted. I mean, I don't think I've ever felt that way before. And then suddenly something came over me. Words were spoken through me. These words that I spoke next were not my own. I didn't want to say them. But I said, "Thank you very much for this experience, but I have to go now." I didn't want to go. I didn't want to say that. Are you kidding? I didn't want to leave. And suddenly I felt myself being pulled away from God's presence, from Jesus' presence, from the presence of heaven, from the presence of all these beings, holy beings around me. I was being pulled away. What happened next, I think, took only about maybe 3 seconds. But I can't describe everything that happened to me in the next 3 seconds in real time. So I'm going to start the 3 seconds now, and I'll tell you at the end of the 3 seconds that happened to me when those 3 seconds are up. So next, I saw myself traveling through a solid tube of light. That's the start of the 3 seconds. And I could see this light going by me, boom, 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 so fast. Wow. And then I started decelerating. And as I looked around, I realized that that was not light that I was in. Well, it's light, but the light is made up of little bitty dots of light. And there are so many dots of light, and I'm traveling so fast through them that it made it look like I was traveling through a pipe of light on the inside. So here I go from light, solid wall around me to these dots, and I'm slowing down, I'm decelerating. Suddenly I see my galaxy. Then I see my solar system. I can identify it. There it is. Then there's Earth. I'm approaching Earth. I'm still slowing down, but I'm moving fast. And suddenly there's the United States. I can see it. And my city. Wow, there's my house. There's my roof. And I saw myself lying in bed. I was hovered over my body at about ceiling height, looking down at my body, seemingly asleep in my own bed. And I very slowly moved from the ceiling level down through my room and merged with my body. And I woke up, and I was cold. I mean, I was cold like I've never experienced cold before. My room was heated. I was in a warm bed. I had covers over my body. But I was absolutely frozen, seemingly. I couldn't move. My muscles were trembling. My joints seemed to be fused. They were just frozen. And I was shivering. My teeth were chattering. And I couldn't do anything to help myself warm up. I just had to lay there because I couldn't walk, I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything. And so I have a clock that I keep by my bed, and I looked at my clock, and I must have laid there 20 minutes maybe. And I was kind of starting to get to feel warmed up, not really. But I thought, you know what? I have got to get myself to the tub. I need to lay down in a tub full of hot water right now. And so I took a big chance. I was home alone, no help if I fell and hurt myself. And so I pulled myself out of bed in great pain, trembling. I could hardly walk. And I held on to furniture and all kinds of things as I made my way across my bedroom floor. And I actually made it to the bathroom. And I ran a tub of hot water. And I don't know how I did it, but I submerged myself in that tub of hot water. And I just laid there and trying to get my body heat back and thinking about my experience and what just happened to me, what's going on, and why am I here? Why am I on the earth? What happened? And so my bath water got cold real quick. And so I drained it out and I ran another tub of hot water and tried to get some body heat back into me. I couldn't even believe I was still alive with that much cold in my body. Couldn't believe there was liquid blood in me pumping through. It should have been frozen a long time ago. And so I started to limber up a little bit. And I do lots of computer work for a living. And I felt absolutely compelled to make it to my office, to sit down in front of a computer and write down these notes of what I just experienced before I possibly forget them. And my chest and my anterior thighs felt like static electricity. Have you ever been to a planetarium and you put your hands on this metallic sphere and your hair stands up on your head? Static electricity, right? That's what I felt on my chest and my anterior thighs. And I don't know why, but man, it was strong. It was very, very prevalent and annoying. But it was there. I couldn't help it. So I got myself up out of the tub. I put on a robe and I wrapped up in 2 or 3 blankets. I put them over my head, everywhere. I was just still cold. And I got myself to my computer chair and my hands were trembling. I could barely key on the computer. I was making mistakes. I was fumbling. I was struggling. But I sat there and hacked it out. And it took me a long time, but I wrote down what I recalled and what I experienced. And I wrote down exactly what I just related to you. And so I looked around in my room, and my room seemed absolutely filthy. And I'm a good housekeeper. And I was disgusted at the condition of the earth. I was disgusted at sin. I was disgusted at my living situation, my home, my furnishings. I mean, everything was just dirty and sinful and disgusting, dark. I just didn't want to be a part of it anymore. You know, God, why'd you send me back? Why did I go? I was there. Why did you send me back? Is this just one more failure of David Rose, you know? Yeah, I went to heaven, but he sent me back. So, you know, what was I supposed to think? What, do I have a mission, God? Did you send me back to earth to tell everybody about my heavenly experience, which they probably won't believe and I'll look like a fool? Or did I say something wrong? I mean, was my fly open? I mean, you know, what happened? And so I was actually angry at God, and I was for years. And so I certainly couldn't work that day. I was up the rest of the night making notes, and so I was absolutely driven to find the highest point around my immediate area that I could go to get as close as I could back to heaven and back to God that was earthly possible. I know that distance and elevation change is so minuscule compared to how far it is to heaven, but I didn't care. I understood the math, I understood the measurements, but man, I was ready to get to a high altitude, to be close to God, no matter how insignificant that elevation change was. So I knew of a place. It's a place where I went to study and pray. So I made a big mistake. I'm crying, I'm upset, but I got in my car and I made a beeline for this high altitude. And it's not really that high, it's Tennessee, right? And so I get there and I watch the sunrise. To most people, it would have been a beautiful sunrise. And it would have been beautiful to me on any other day previous to this one. But to me, that sunrise was sinful and ugly and I don't know, just terrible, dirty, and it was just not what I wanted. I have to. So I was struggling. I had a hard time. And I didn't know what God wanted for me. I tried to get back to a normal life. I was looking for signs. I was looking for messages from God. You know, go here, do this. Tell this person your story. Tell this church that story. What should I do? I told very few people. I was going into a friend's shop one time. She sells high-end Native American art. And as I walked in the door, I heard this beautiful ethnic flute music with guitar accompaniment. And I said, Kathy, what is that song? That is absolutely beautiful. And she said, a Native American man from Nashville just came in, gave me his CD, and I just put it on. And this is the title song from the CD. And he just left. I'm surprised you didn't see him when you came in. So I said, let me see that CD. And guess what the title song was? I Gave My All For You. Blew my mind. And I tried to reach him. There was an address and a phone number on the CD, but I never made contact with that artist. That hurt me. So I thought, well, God, am I supposed to go the Native American path? What's going on? So a friend of mine up in Washington State called me and said, David, I think you need to come up here to Washington State. There's a man I want you to meet. He's a Sioux medicine man. I think he can help you with your post-war PTSD. So I said, okay, sure. And here was another Native American connection. So I was trying to make a path and add all this up. So I went up there and I was interviewed for 24 hours by this medicine man, nonstop. No food, no sleep. And he said, I think I can help you with your PTSD. He said, be here tomorrow, be rested, and I'm going to do a sweat lodge for you. So came back, and there were half a dozen other Sioux warriors there. And we did a sweat, and they did a special ceremony for me. And they decided that they wanted to adopt me into their Sioux nation based on my experience and character and everything. And so they gave me the name of Wambali Iskma, which in English means eagle's wing. And So I accepted that name, and for months I did feel better. And I traveled on to California, where I started work as a U.S. park ranger in Yosemite National Park. And I lived and worked at Glacier Point. Glacier Point is about 7,500 feet elevation. That's where my cabin was, at 7,500 feet. And it was the absolute most beautiful place, probably the top 5 most beautiful in this country, maybe even in the world. And that's where I was living. And I had been seeking this high elevation home and workplace for a couple of years. I traveled all over the country seeking high elevation where I could commune with God. And here now I'm living in it. So one day I'm out at the point and I'm talking to about 100 people, lecturing. And off to the side, I noticed a woman standing there, and I'd never seen her before, but I was attracted to her. She had this most amazing bright aura. The aura went all the way out of sight into the sky. It was white with purple and gold and maroon scattered, streaking through it. And I told the 100 people, I said, "Excuse me, I need to go talk to this woman." And so I said, "I'll be back. Don't go." So I went over and I said, "Ma'am, who are you?" And she said, "I'm with a church called I Am." And she said, "I'm here to give you a message that that great warrior that you saw in heaven is your personal guardian angel." She said, he kept you alive in Vietnam. He has saved your life numerous times, and he saved it again in your heavenly experience. And she said, your guardian angel's name, the earthly equivalent name, is Hercules. And she said, he lives here at Glacier Point when he visits the earth. And she said, he lives right over there. And she told me exactly where it was. I said, I know that place. I go there myself many times and sit there and pray and meditate. And I told her that's a special place for me as well. And she handed me a pamphlet of her church. It said, I Am, right across the brochure. And she said, please come visit us in our church. We want you there. And I looked back at the crowd of people to make sure they were still there, the crowd that I was talking to. And I looked back at her, and she was gone. And I looked down the path. She didn't have time to cover that much ground down the path, but she wasn't anywhere to be seen. So I went back to my group of people, and I apologized for leaving them. I said it was very important to me. And I said, did you see the woman I was talking to? And one of them said, no, but we heard you talking, and we didn't know who you were talking to. And so I said, well, I apologize for that. And I continued on with my lecture. And I never made it to her church. I work on the weekends, as you can imagine, in the park. Those are our busiest visitation days, and it's hard to get a day off on the weekend. So I was still frustrated, didn't know exactly what to do with all this, but I did put together my thoughts and wrote a little booklet. And this video is not to sell my book. I'm not selling this to you. In fact, I priced it as low as you can price it on Amazon. I think I make a penny on every book that I sell. I give away more of these books than I sell. But um, my little talk that I just gave you is on Amazon. I gave my all for you with the author of David Rose. If you want to share this book with somebody, share my story with somebody. So I did do that much over the last 13 years, wrote a little booklet about it. But this video is the biggest step that I've made in promoting this story in a somewhat larger way. I don't know what else to do with it, but I'm 70 years old and I wanted it to be documented. I wanted people to hear it, and I don't want it to pass away with me. So it's out there in digital form now, and hopefully somebody can be blessed when they hear this story or relate to it in some way. But something interesting, over 10 years since my experience, I never thought of what I'm about to tell you. I told my story that I just told you to a good friend, and she said, "David, what may have happened to you is you died in your sleep in your bed, and you ascended to heaven, and you experienced what you remember, and you were given a second chance by your guardian angel, or by God, or by Jesus, and you came back to life. That's why you were so cold when you re-emerged with your body, because you were absent from your body, and your body was lying there dead for who knows how many hours. And when you re-emerged with your body, you had rigor mortis possibly, you were ice cold seemingly, and you had to warm your body back up in order to function properly." It's funny, me being in the medical field all my life, not one time in 10 years did I ever think of that. And I realized that, wow, you may be right. I may be just like all of the other testimonials that I heard during my career in surgery of people who passed away on the table. They go to the light, they go to heaven, and we save them and they come back. Is that what happened to me? I don't know. I can't prove it. I was there alone. Nobody else was there. Nobody's a witness to this. All I have to go on are my own recollections of the experience that I had that night. And so 13 years now, I think about this experience every day. And I pray to God every day, please impress me to do something. Finally, I had the energy and horsepower to sit in front of this camera and tell you this story. And I hope that through hearing this, it blessed you somehow. I hope that you have learned something. I hope that you have come closer to God. And I hope that you gained something in some way. But you know what? You can go to heaven too. Jesus is coming again. And he's going to take his people home to heaven with him. Start with John 3:16. There are lots of texts in the Bible. If you acquire my book, I have an index of texts in the Bible that tell you about your salvation and how you can have salvation. Jesus can give it to you. So my journey's not over, and nor is yours. Maybe your journey's just starting. But either way, I want to see you in heaven, because I'm going to be there. I've been to hell, the Vietnam War, and I've been to heaven. I choose heaven. I hope you do.